This is a video of why Temu is evil than we think. Let's just start.
On Temu right now, it's a teething glove. It's a little fabric mitten you put on a baby. You know, a baby, that thing that's at a stage where everything goes in its mouth because, well, I mean, that's the entire function of the glove. The baby chews the glove instead of the cot or the remote or your fingers. You know, ordinary bit of kit, millions of parents own one. In early 2025, a European consumer group bought a Temu teething glove and sent it to a laboratory. The lab found it contained 5 times the legal limit of formaldehyde. It also found 4 times the legal limit of a lovely little chemical called nonylphenol ethoxylate. But that second one is an endocrine disruptor, which means it interferes with the hormone system of the small human currently sucking on it. Formaldehyde in the glove, the one designed specifically for babies to put in their mouths. And the part that stuck with me was this. The same consumer group tested 108 different products bought on Temu. 104 of them failed. That's 96%. The teething glove wasn't even the worst thing they found, which tells you something fairly bleak about the other 107 things. The company that sold the glove is one of the biggest retailers on earth. You've seen the adverts, shop like a billionaire. Well, over the next hour, I'm going to show you what billionaire shopping actually costs, because it does cost something. It costs an absolute fortune. It's just that the bill doesn't go to you. And the poison baby toys are where this starts, but they are nowhere near where it ends. Right, so anyway, hello, welcome to the Rogues, and I should probably explain how I ended up here, because it genuinely wasn't the plan. So I went on Temu, you know, because I wanted a phone charger and a couple of those little plastic drawer divider thingamabobs, and Temu had them for roughly the price of a meal deal. So I thought, yeah, alright, fine, go on then. And then, because this is apparently what I do now, I started reading about the company, about where the cable came from and how it reached my door and why it cost less than a sandwich I ate while ordering it. Well, about 4 days later, I'm sitting here with about 900 pages of court filings, congressional testimony, regulatory findings, and lab reports, and a phone cable I'm now slightly frightened of. This is what was in those 900 pages. It is a lot. So we'll start with the only question that matters, the one everything else hangs off. How is this so cheap? First, the size of the thing, because you can't be properly angry about Temu until you understand how much of your life it has quietly moved into. Temu launched in the United States in September 2022. Within 17 days, the app had overtaken Instagram, WhatsApp, Snapchat, and Shein in the American App Store. 17 days. Most apps don't get noticed in 17 days. This thing became the thing that everyone had. So by the end of 2023, it was the most downloaded shopping app on the planet. 337 million downloads in a single year. That's around 80% more than Amazon. Amazon, the company that more or less invented buying things on the internet, got comprehensively out-downloaded by an app most people couldn't have placed 2 years earlier. In February 2024, Temu ran 3 adverts during the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl is the most expensive advertising real estate in the world, and they bought 3 slots at roughly $7 million each, and then handed out another $15 million in giveaways on the same day. Shop like a billionaire, the advert said. And downloads jumped, and daily users jumped, and the machine got a whole lot bigger. By September 2024, Temu had 92 million monthly users inside the European Union alone. Roughly 1 in 5 people in the EU opening this app every month. Not a niche, then. In Britain, it became one of those things that's just around, on your phone, in your group chats, on the doorstep in a little grey plastic mailer. So that's the scale. A few years from nothing to one of the largest retail operations in the world, in everyone's pocket and on everyone's map. Now, hold that thought, because a company this enormous you would assume must be making a colossal amount of money. It isn't. It's doing the opposite. And the opposite is so strange that it took me a while to actually believe it. Let's do the obvious bit of maths. The bit Temu would really rather you didn't. You order a dress on Temu for £2. That dress was designed by someone, and the design was sent to a factory, and someone bought the fabric, and someone cut it, and then someone sewed it, and someone packed it. Then it was flown, like physically flown on an aeroplane thousands of miles from a factory in China to a sorting centre near you, and then a guy in a van brought it to your house. Design, materials, labour, packaging, international flight, and a man in a van for £2. With Temu and the factory both supposedly taking a cut, that's not a bargain. That's not even possible. And once you accept that it isn't possible, the actual question arrives. And it's a much better question. If the price doesn't cover the cost, who covers the difference?
Yeah, right.
Well, here's the answer. And it is genuinely one of the strangest facts I found. Before the rules changed in 2025, analysts estimated that Temu lost around $30 on every single order it shipped to an American customer. Not $30 on the big orders, $30 on average on all of them. Every parcel that landed on a doormat in America somewhere, the company waved goodbye to about $30. Estimates for the annual loss on US orders ran somewhere between $588 million and $954 million. I had to mull that one over for a bit. The cheapest shop in the world is also, per parcel, one of the most expensive shops in the world to run. They are, in a fairly literal sense, paying you to shop there. On top of pre-order losses, Temu spent. In 2024, the company's marketing budget was estimated at around $3 billion. $3 billion in a single year. One company spent $2 billion of that with Meta alone. For a stretch of late 2023, it was the second biggest advertiser on Facebook, on Earth, behind only Amazon. So picture the full machine. Lose money on every order. They spend $3 billion convincing more people to place more orders you'll also lose money on. As a business plan, read out, that sounds like a man having a breakdown. It only sounds like a breakdown. It's a strategy, and the strategy has a name in tech, and the name is buy the market. The idea is simple and very cold. You set fire to an unimaginable pile of money for a few years. You make your prices so low that ordinary shops physically cannot compete and they start closing. You make the app so shit and so habitual that buying things on it stops feeling like a decision and starts feeling like a reflex. And then, once you are the last shop standing and the habit is set, you gently, quietly raise the prices and the unshittification starts. And by then, there is nowhere else to go. So the £2 is baked. What's actually being sold is the habit. You come back 30 times a year for the rest of your life. And we know it's 30 times, roughly, because someone wrote the number down. Reporting on Temu's internal targets describes a long-term goal of $1,500 of spending per American user per year. Around 30 purchases of about $50 each. That's a number you want to make note of, by the way. But we'll come back to that, and when we do, it will explain why the app behaves the way that it behaves. So the cheapness is a system, a deliberate, expensive, patient system, which leaves one more thing to explain before we get to the damage. Setting fire to $1 billion a year is a thing a company can choose to do, but you still have to get hundreds of millions of physical parcels across an ocean and through a border. Well, borders have rules, you know, and rules cost money. Unless you found the one rule that doesn't. Every country has a number. It's a very boring number, but it's the value below which a parcel coming into the country is too small to bother taxing or properly inspecting. Customs officers have finite hours, and chasing 40 pence of duty on a phone case is not a good use of them. So there's a threshold. Below it, the parcel basically waltzes on through. It is called a de minimis threshold, which is Latin and it means about trivial things. In the United States, that number was $800. $800 is not a trivial thing. $800 is most of a month's rent in a lot of places. But that was the line. Any parcel valued under $800 could enter America duty-free with very little customs paperwork and very little in the way of inspection. Now, almost everything on Temu costs like a few quid, which means almost every Temu parcel sails straight under that $800 line with enormous room to spare. A bipartisan committee of the US Congress went and did the sums. Bipartisan matters here, so I'll say it clearly. This was not one political side having a go at China. This was both sides in a room agreeing for once. And they found that Temu and Shein together were responsible for somewhere around 600,000 of these low-value parcels entering America. That's not per year, by the way. That is per day. 600,000 a day. So we have 600,000 parcels per day, and that's more than 30% of all such shipments in the entire country. Two companies, largely duty-free and largely uninspected. And the committee made a comparison that I think lands the whole thing. A traditional retailer, your Gap, your H&M, brings clothes into America the old-fashioned way, in big consolidated shipments. Which get taxed, which get inspected. They pay millions in import duties, and a custom officer can open a container and look. Well, Temu's model skipped nearly all of that. Not by cheating exactly, but by using a rule completely legally in a way that nobody writing the rules ever pictured actually happening. The rule existed for your nan posting you your birthday jumper. It was not built for an industrial fire hose of 600,000 parcels a day. Which is why, when people called de minimis a loophole Temu exploited, I think they're underselling it somewhat. That duty-free, barely inspected little parcel was the foundation the whole American business stood on. Strip out the duty, strip out the inspection, and suddenly £2 for a flown-in dress moves from impossible to merely reckless. And then in 2025, America closed it. President Trump signed an executive order ending duty-free de minimis treatment for goods from China and Hong Kong. It took effect on the 2nd of May 2025. A later order extended the closure worldwide. The result was instant and brutal. By the data analysis at Sensor Tower, Temu's daily active users in America fell by roughly half between March and May 2025. Half in 2 months. US sales dropped by around 23% at the worst point. The thing that built Temu in America was a loophole, and when the loophole shut, the American business just fell off a cliff. Temu's response was fast, and it's worth watching because it tells you what kind of company you're dealing with. They didn't apologize, and they did not slow down. They restructured. Sellers were moved to ship into US warehouses in bulk instead. New shipping models appeared within weeks, and importantly, the company simply pivoted its growth somewhere the door was still open. While American ad spending was slashed, European ad spending went up. By the first half of 2025, America had dropped below 35% of Temu's global sales, and Europe had climbed to somewhere between 38 and 45. The company didn't shrink. It rerouted. It looked at the map, saw America had shut a door, and it just walked straight round to ours. And remember that, it's going to matter. But I have skipped something. I've told you the committee did the customs maths. I haven't told you why a committee of Congress was crawling through Temu's shipping paperwork in the first place. And that has nothing to do with tax. And we're going to get to that, but it's in Chapter 6, and I'll be honest with you, it is the worst one. First, though, the boxes themselves, because we've established the parcels arrive cheap and barely inspected, so time to open one. This is the chapter where it stops being funny. I want to be careful and very precise here, because precision is the whole point. There's a fair criticism of some Temu reporting, and I'll put it up front so that you can hold me to it. A lot of the product testing you'll read about was not random. Consumer groups didn't buy 1,000 items at random and test them. They used risk analysis. They deliberately targeted the kinds of products most likely to be dangerous, the cheap electronics, the kids' toys, and then they tested those. So I can't tell you everything on Temu is poison. Nobody has the data to say that, and I am not going to pretend otherwise. But what I can tell you is what happened when people who knew where to look went looking. And that is bad enough. That is much more than bad enough. Start in Seoul. The Seoul Metropolitan Government has been running lab tests on products from Temu and similar platforms since 2024. Weekly, routine. This is a city government doing ordinary consumer safety work. In August 2024, they tested a pair of sandals sold on Temu. The insoles contained lead at more than 11 times the legal limit. Lead in sandals. Lead is, in the words of the World Health Organization, particularly harmful to young children, and it does its damage to the brain and the nervous system. And that damage does not undo itself. It got worse. Later testing found a Temu jacket containing a phthalate called DEHP, at 622 times the legal limit. I'll let you mull over that one for a bit because I had to. 622 times. DEHP is listed by the US National Toxicology Program as reasonably anticipated to be a human carcinogen. The same jacket also came in over 3 times the legal limit for lead and over 3 times the legal limit for cadmium. And cadmium is a known human carcinogen. There's no anticipated about that one. A Temu jumpsuit tested at 294 times the phthalate limit. A children's umbrella exceeded the children's safety limit by 443 times. Yes, I have checked those figures more than once because the first time you read 622 times the legal limit, your instinct is that someone added a zero. No, no. Nobody has added a zero. Those are, in fact, the numbers. Now, Europe. That consumer group from the Open is called BEUC, the umbrella body for European consumer organisations. Their cross-EU test, the one with the teething glove, looked at 108 Temu products. 96% failed to comply with EU safety rules. You know, the teething glove, the formaldehyde, the baby's mouth, you know, remember that whole thing? Well, then Britain, which the UK consumer organisation ran its own tests, and these I found even harder to take because they're just so total. Which bought 3 electric heaters on Temu, and all 3 were electrically unsafe and illegal to sell in the UK. 3 out of 3. They tested 82 connected products, things like wireless cameras and smart doorbells and devices you put up specifically to make your home safer. 100% of them failed to comply, every single one. They tested 13 cosmetic products, 100% non-compliant. The British Toy and Hobby Association looked at 5 toys bought from Temu and judged 3 of them to pose a choking or suffocation risk to a child. Stack it up. Lead in the sandals, carcinogens in the jacket, formaldehyde in the teething gloves, heaters that can burn your house down, smart doorbells bought to keep you safe that don't meet the most basic safety law, and toys sold for children that a children's toy authority says could choke a child. The bit that turns this from a sad list into something I genuinely called sinister is this. None of it is secret to Temu. In July 2025, the European Commission, the EU's most senior regulator, issued a preliminary finding against Temu. They had done their own mystery shopping, sent their own people in to buy things like everyone else, and they found EU consumers were, their phrase, very likely to encounter illegal products on the platform, including baby toys and small electronics. And then the Commission said something quite damning about Temu's own internal risk assessment. The company is legally required to assess the risk of illegal products on its marketplace. Temu's assessment, the Commission found, leaned on generic industry information rather than specifics about its own actual marketplace. The EU's tech commissioner, Heine Virkkunen, put it plainly. In her words, Temu was far from assessing risks for its users at the standards that the law required. In ordinary English, the regulator's preliminary view is that Temu didn't really look. A company shipping hundreds of millions of parcels with this testing record sitting in the public domain produced a safety assessment that the regulator found generic and inadequate. To be fair to Temu, and I will be because the facts are more than strong enough that I can afford to be, when specific dangerous products are flagged, Temu does generally pull them. It removes the lead sandals. It runs a product safety recall page. Its standard line given to journalists over and over is a version of, "We launched an internal investigation. We swiftly removed the listings. We're improving our systems." But notice what that response actually is. It's reactive. Every single time. The poison goes on sale, a consumer group or a city government or a journalist finds it, and then and only then Temu acts. The toy comes down after someone has already proven in a lab that it could choke a child, which means by definition, between the toy going up and the toy coming down, it was on sale to parents as a toy. That's the model. The platform is the fire hose, and the fire hose is pointed at your house, and the safety system is, well, wait for a stranger to test it and complain. Which raises a question that we should sit with for a second. Who is the stranger? Who actually catches this stuff? Because it sure as shit isn't Temu. It's a city council in Seoul doing weekly tests. It's a charity in Britain buying heaters with its own money. It's the European Commission sending mystery shoppers. The safety net under the cheapest shop on earth turns out to be a patchwork of councils and charities and overstretched regulators testing as fast as they can, while 600,000 parcels a day come over the wall. And every one of them will tell you the same thing. They can't keep up. They were never built to keep up with this. And this is important because it's the real shape of this whole story, and we'll see it again. The harm here is structural. It's what the machine produces when its speed is set faster than anyone's ability to check it. Right, quick round. Faster pace, this one. Every company we've ever covered on this channel has one defining scandal. Temu has a defining scandal in roughly 6 separate categories. And if I gave each one a full chapter, we would be here until Christmas. So this is a rapid section, the bits where any single item would have been its own video or be very bad for a normal company. First, the app itself and how it's built to feel. Open Temu and you're not really in a shop. You're in a small casino that happens to sell colanders. There's a spinning wheel that pops up offering prizes. There are countdown timers telling you a deal expires in minutes. There's a virtual pet fish you feed by referring your friends. There's fake scarcity, only 2 left, when there's not only 2 left. Then there are pseudo prizes that turn out to need another purchase or another 3 friends to actually claim. These have a name. They're called dark patterns. Design choices built not to help you, but to nudge you, pressure you, and wear you down. And in 2024, BEUC, with 17 national consumer organisations behind it, filed a formal complaint to the EU, layering all of this out. The forced little games, the timers, the friction they built into the account deletion process, specifically so that leaving is annoying enough that you don't bother. Now remember that number from chapter 2. 30 purchases a year, $1,500 per user. That's the internal target. And once you know the target, the spinning wheel stops looking like a bit of fun and starts looking like exactly what it is. A machine for turning a person into 30 purchases a year. That fish you keep feeding is a key performance indicator with fins. Second, America's consumer regulator, the FTC. In September 2025, the FTC settled with the company that operates Temu. Temu agreed to pay a $2 million civil penalty over failures to comply with a law called the Informed Consumers Act, which is about giving shoppers proper information and reporting tools, particularly in those gamified listings. The FTC called it the first enforcement action ever brought under that act. Temu got to be the example. Third, data, and here I'm going to have to slow down a little bit because here is where I have to be honest with you about something. There is a scary version of the Temu data story. This version is where the app is described as spyware, as malware, as a data theft operation that happens to sell tat. You may have heard of it, and it comes mainly from a report by a firm called Grizzly Research in 2023. Well, here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to read that report as fact. Grizzly Research is a short seller. That means they disclosed this openly themselves, that they had a financial position that paid out if Temu's parent company's share price dropped. They published a frightening report about the company and they stood to profit from that fear. So that doesn't automatically make them wrong, but it is absolutely meaning I'm not putting it in the proven column, and neither probably should you. Several US states have since sued Temu, with attorney generals using words like malware and spyware. Arkansas, Kentucky, Nebraska. Those are serious people making serious allegations, but allegations are what they are. As things stand, no court has ruled the Temu app is spyware. A lawsuit is an accusation with a filing fee. It is not a verdict. So I will tell you only what's actually nailed down, and it is still not comforting. Temu's own privacy policy, the company's own document, describes collecting a very wide spread of data. Your purchases and payment details, your browsing and search history, what's sitting in your cart, your device information, your approximate location from your IP address. The policy also says it shares data with affiliates, advertisers, and analytical partners, and others. That is all from Temu's own document. Nothing leaked, no alleged lawsuit. The company itself tells you in writing that it does that. And there's harder evidence than the policy. In 2023, Apple briefly suspended Temu from the App Store for misrepresenting the data permissions it was asking for. Not for confirmed spyware, for misrepresenting permissions. And in 2025, South Korea's privacy regulator fined Temu over the unlawful transfer of South Korean users' personal data abroad. That one's not an allegation. A regulator looked, found a breach, and issued a penalty. There is one more thing worth saying, for fairness and for accuracy, because it actually matters. Temu's sister app, Pinduoduo, the Chinese app from the same parent company, was caught up in a genuine, independently confirmed malware finding. Google pulled Pinduoduo from its Play Store in 2023. Multiple security firms confirmed off-store versions of the app exploited a serious Android vulnerability. That happened. It's real. But Pinduoduo is not Temu. Same parent company, but it's a different app. The security researchers who nailed Pinduoduo did not extend that finding to Temu. So if anyone tells you Temu is confirmed Chinese spyware, the honest answer is, well, its sister has confirmed malware in its history. The app itself collects a lot of data by its own admission, it's been fined and suspended for data handling problems, and the scariest specific claims is in front of judges and not yet proven. That's the truth. The truth is bad enough. It doesn't need upgrading. Fourth, and quickly, intellectual property. Temu spends a remarkable amount of its time in court. It has been sued by independent designers and by brands. The brand 21 Pilots sued it over alleged counterfeit merchandise, and Temu and Shein have spent 2 solid years suing each other, each accusing the other of copying or theft or of dirty tricks. At one point, Temu's own legal filing accused Shein of the actual phrase mafia-style intimidation of suppliers. When 2 of the biggest fast commerce companies on earth describe each other in language from a gangster film, it's worth assuming both of them know the other one well. Okay, so that's the quick round. A casino interface engineered to hit 30 purchases a year, a first of its kind regulator penalty, a data operation that's confirmed broad, fined abroad and accused of far worse, a non-stop legal war over copied products. Any one of those would be a serious problem for an ordinary company. Temu has all of them at once, and we still haven't reached the worst parts. Because so far, every victim in this story has been a customer. And now we need to talk about the people on the other end, the people who actually make the things and the people who actually sell them. That's where it gets genuinely hard to narrate. I told you a bipartisan committee of Congress was crawling through Temu's shipping records, and that it had nothing to do with tax. This is what it was about. It was about whether the things you're buying were made by people who were forced to make them. I'm going to be very careful here, and I need you to notice me being careful because this is the chapter where the temptation to overstate is strongest, where overstating would be the worst. So, the line, clearly. What follows is alleged and circumstantial. It is not, as things stand, a court verdict. But the circumstantial evidence is heavy, and it comes from bipartisan sources, and you should hear it and weigh it for yourself. In June 2023, the US House Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party published an interim report. This committee was led by a Republican and a Democrat. They examined Temu's system for keeping forced labor out of its supply chain. Specifically, compliance with a US law called Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, which exists because of the well-documented use of forced labor involving the Uyghur people in the Xinjiang region of China. The committee's findings about Temu's systems were not the systems are weak. The findings were closer to there were essentially no systems. The report stated that Temu conducted no audits and reported no compliance program to keep forced labor goods off of the platform. It said the company relied on boilerplate contractual promises from its sellers. Sign here, promise you're not using slave labor. Good enough, off you go. And then the detail I want to focus on here. Temu told the committee that it operated a compliant-based system, meaning the way Temu would find out about forced labor in the supply chain was if somebody, a customer, a seller, or a regulator, filed a complaint about it. The committee asked how many complaints that system had received. It had received none. 0. Temu apparently offered that as a reassurance. No complaints. The committee did not take it as reassurance. The committee described, their words, the dubious nature of a system that relies solely on external reporting, which is a very polite way congressional way of saying this. A complaint box that has never once rung only tells you one thing for certain. Nobody is checking it. Let's think about what that system actually asks. For it to catch forced labour, a worker being forced to labour would need to know their product ended up on Temu, know what Temu is, have safe internet access, know that the complaints procedure exists, and know how to file it. From inside of a forced labour situation. The committee's verdict was that this arrangement all but guaranteed forced labour tainted goods were entering America. It got more specific than systems as well. The committee also stated that Temu did not expressly prohibit its third-party sellers from selling products based on their origin in Xinjiang. And the committee included, in its report, a screenshot taken in May 2023 of a product on Temu. The product was titled, and I am going to read the listing, New Handmade Knitted Cotton Pendant with Xinjiang Cotton. Xinjiang Cotton in the product title as a selling point. And then there is the journalism. Around the same sort of time, the Bloomberg reporter Sheridan Prasso ran an investigation using a digital vetting tool to trace Temu products back to their suppliers. Her team identified a set of ordinary objects sold to American customers that traced back to suppliers in Xinjiang. I want to read you that list, because the ordinariness of it is the thing that gets under your skin. Sunglasses, sandals, children's modelling clay, a ring, wall panelling, rice storage containers, a car window ice scraper, colanders, and a bath mat. A bath mat, an ice scraper. These are the most boring objects imaginable. The stuff in everyone's house. That's the texture of this. Not some exotic conspiracy. A colander. A researcher called Adrian Zenz also documented something quietly nasty. He found hidden keyword tags in the website's code in Chinese characters for Xinjiang cotton. Tags that helped products surface in some searches without the words being visible to the customer reading the page. Make of that what you will. Now, Temu's defense, because it does get one. By 2025, Temu's executives were telling British MPs a more developed story. They said Temu is only a marketplace, that it connects buyers and sellers. They said cotton products were a very small fraction of UK sales, under 1%. They said their code of conduct prohibits forced labour. And in front of that committee, a senior Temu lawyer said directly that the company does not permit sellers from the Xinjiang region to sell on Temu, and that it was bringing in rules to make sellers disclose where products are manufactured. Alright, well let's take that at face value. It's a real change from 2023. Banning Xinjiang sellers is genuinely better than not banning them. But look at what that promise does and doesn't cover. Banning a seller located in Xinjiang does not prove the cotton is a product, or as a product, wasn't grown there. It doesn't prove the factory 3 steps up the chain is clean. Raw material moves, it gets spun and woven and shipped and sold on, and the field it came from is a long way back down that chain, so far that nobody outside the company can actually see. Temu has described its checks. What Temu has not done, in anything I could find in the public record, is open the whole chain to genuinely independent supplier by supplier verification. So where does that leave us? Honestly, it leaves us here. We do not have a court ruling that says a specific Temu product was made with forced labour. We do have a bipartisan committee finding that the company, certainly as of 2023, had next to no system to prevent it. It ran a complaint box that had never been rung and didn't even ban products by Xinjiang origin. We have a Xinjiang cotton listing screenshotted off the live site. We have a Bloomberg investigation tracing a colander and a bath mat and an ice scraper back to the region. And we have a model, the whole model, 600,000 barely inspected parcels a day. That is close to perfectly designed to make sure nobody ever has to look. You don't need me to land that for you. Just sit with the ice scraper. That'll do it. And while you're sitting with the ice scraper, I'm going to change the subject because there's another group of people getting hurt by Temu. And these ones we can name. And what happened to them is documented and confirmed and not alleged at all. It's the people who sell on Temu, and before them, the people who built the machine in the first place. I'm going to start this chapter with 2 people, not statistics. two people with the detail we have because they matter and because the rest of the chapter doesn't make sense without them. Temu's parent company also runs Pinduoduo, the giant shopping app inside China. And Pinduoduo, for years, has had a reputation for working its staff in a way that's brutal even by the standards of an industry that's not famous for its gentleness. A schedule that's sometimes described as 11 in the morning to 11 at night, 6 days a week, plus overtime. In late December 2020, a 22-year-old employee, a young woman known publicly by the surname Zhang, was walking home from work with colleagues. It was around 1:30 in the morning. She collapsed in the street. She died in hospital 2 hours later. She was 22. Less than 2 weeks after that, a Pinduoduo engineer known by the name Tan died by suicide. In the public anger that followed, an official Pinduoduo account posted a comment that was widely read as suggesting ordinary people had no choice but to trade. The phrase that went around the Chinese internet, life for money. The company deleted it. The deletion did not make it go away. I'm not going to perform anything over the top of that. Two young people, one walking home in the dark. I just think, before we start talking about the business model, you should know that the business model has a temperature. And the temperature is this. Okay, so, right, the sellers. When you buy something on Temu, you're often not really buying from Temu, you're buying from one of tens of thousands of independent merchants, mostly in China, who list their products on the platform. Temu sits in the middle and just sort of takes a cut. You know, it's the standard marketplace setup on the surface. Underneath the surface, the relationship between Temu and those merchants is something else. And in the summer of 2024, it broke into the open because hundreds of those merchants physically turned up at a PDD office building in Guangzhou and protested for 2 days. This isn't rumor. It was reported by Bloomberg, by Reuters, by NPR, by CNN, by Caixin. Around 80 protesters got inside the building before police intervened. Well, what were they protesting? A penalty system. An after-sales fine regime that, frankly, when I first read the mechanics of, I assumed I'd misunderstood it. Here's how it worked, as reporters who dug into it describe it. A merchant sells a product through Temu. A customer later complains about it, and Temu can then fine the merchant. The fine, in the harshest form of the system, could reach up to 5 times the sale price of the product. 5 times! Sell a £10 item, someone complains, lose 50 quid. Oh, and boy does it get worse from here. The fine can be levied, merchant said, often without any real evidence and frequently without the customer even being required to send the product back. So the customer keeps the item, the customer gets a refund, and the seller is fined a multiple of what they were even paid. As for the goods that did get returned, reporting indicates most of them were simply destroyed. Run that forward. The seller loses the product, the seller loses the sale, the seller loses up to 5 times the sale on top, and there was, sellers said, no meaningful way to appeal. NPR's reporting put a person to it. A merchant given the pseudonym Doding said he'd been fined around 800,000 yuan over a year, somewhere near $110,000, with, in his account, no explanation of what the complaints were even for. He drove 20 hours to Guangzhou to protest. 20 hours in a car, because that felt like a more realistic route to being heard than the appeal process. Another seller in denim had a deposit of 2.7 million yuan tied up with the platform, and after the protests managed to recover 38,000 of it, out of 2.7 million. Another told CNN the platform had frozen around 2 million yuan, roughly $276,000 of his complete sales. I keep going back to one phrase a strategist used, talking to CNN about why the merchant finally snapped. She said it had become almost impossible to actually make a profit selling on Temu, and that's the thing that reframes the whole platform for me. We've spent this video establishing that Temu actually loses money on every order, so who, in this arrangement, is absorbing the loss? Well, some of it is the parent company, who's burnt billions, yes. But the real share of it is being pushed through fines and frozen funds and forced price cuts straight onto small merchants. The ones with the deposit on the line. Temu's response to protests: the company said the penalties were necessary for marketplace quality and customer satisfaction. It said most merchants benefited overall through higher sales, and it said the protesting merchants had declined to use the proper arbitration and legal channels in their seller agreements. Proper channels, the same agreements that built the 5 times price fine in the first place, and that Duding eventually felt so confident in that he chose a 20-hour drive instead. So picture the full shape of it now. At one end, customers are sold poison toys and unsafe heaters and a casino described as a shop. At the other end, merchants are squeezed by fines they say they can't predict and can't appeal. Possibly somewhere up the chain, workers who were never asked, and 2 young people years ago at the very start of all of this, and one of whom never made it home. Every group that touches this company seems to end up carrying part of the bill, which leaves the obvious, furious question, the one I actually opened about 900 pages ago trying to answer. How? How is all of this allowed to simply continue? Okay, this is the chapter that explains the other 7, because everything so far has been the rap sheet. Now this is the machine, and it starts with a simple challenge. I want you to point to Temu on a map. Yeah, go on, right now. Where is it? No, that's right, you can't. And that is the first defense, and it's no accident. It's beautiful, sort of in the way a really good lock is beautiful. Temu is operated under a corporate group called PDD Holdings. So where is PDD? Well, PDD Holdings is incorporated in the Cayman Islands. That's the legal home. A set of paperwork in a tax haven in the Caribbean. Okay, so where is its head office then? Its principal executive offices are listed in Dublin. In a 2023 filing, the company quietly changed its registered address from Shanghai to a building on St. Stephen's Green in Dublin. A Beijing-based analyst, taking to the South China Morning Post, described that move as primarily about avoiding geopolitical risk. Dublin also comes with Ireland's low corporate tax and the legitimacy of an EU address. Handy. So is it run from Dublin? No, not really. Temu's US operations run out of Boston through a company called Whaleco. And the actual engineering, the actual product, the people who built the thing, that all traces back to Shanghai, to its sister company, Pinduoduo. Add it up. Caribbean paperwork, a Dublin postbox, a Boston front office, a Shanghai brain, 4 locations on 4 different legal and political footings, and not one of them is in a place you could meaningfully say, well, Temu is here. This is the building. This is the jurisdiction. Sue them here. After the Dublin move, the company even started removing references to PDD Holdings from Temu's own About Us page. A company you cannot locate is a company that is very, very hard to hold responsible. That's defense 1. Be everywhere and be nowhere. Defense 2 is be a marketplace. You'll have noticed Temu's lawyers say this constantly. We're a marketplace. We connect buyers and sellers. We don't make the products. And legally, that word does an enormous amount of lifting. The poison toy? Third-party seller listed that. The forced labour in question? Third-party sellers. Their supply chains, you see? The marketplace word lets the company take the cut from the middle of the transaction while holding the harm at arm's length on either side with the merchants. You'll have noticed Temu's lawyers say this constantly. We're a marketplace. We just connect buyers and sellers. We don't make the products. And legally, that word does an enormous amount of lifting. The poison toy? Oh, no, it's a third-party seller that listed that. The forced labour question? Oh, it's third-party sellers. It's their supply chains. The marketplace word lets the company take the cut from the middle of the transaction while holding the harm at arm's length on either side with the merchants. It wants the revenue of a shop and the liability of a notice board. Defense 3, and this is the cold one. Make the penalties smaller than the profits. The FTC penalty we talked about was $2 million. To you and me, $2 million is a big chunk of change. To a company with a revenue around $60 billion a year, $2 million barely registers. It's a parking ticket. It's a rounding error. It is genuinely a tiny fraction of what they were spending each day to acquire customers. A fine that small doesn't change behaviour, it just gets logged as a cost of doing business and then the business carries on. Now, the EU is the one regulator in this whole story holding a stick big enough to actually matter. If the European Commission confirms its preliminary findings against Temu, the law allows a fine of up to 6% of total worldwide annual turnover. On PDD's recent revenue, 6% comes out to somewhere in the region of $3.5 billion. Nobody logs 3.5 billion quid as petty cash. That would be the largest single regulatory action ever taken against an ultra-cheap online retailer. If it lands. If. Because Defence 4 is the one that ties the whole thing together. Moving faster than the people chasing you. Think back to what happened when America closed the de minimis loophole. The legal change took years of committee work, reports, hearings, executive orders. It took years. Temu's response, the warehouse restructure, the new shipping models, the pivot of its growth into Europe, took weeks, not years, weeks. That is the real mechanism. That is how they got away with it. And it was never one clever trick. It's a speed difference. Regulators, courts, customs officers, consumer charities, city councils running weekly lab tests. They will move at the speed of law and procedure and public budgets, which is slow because it's meant to be careful. Temu moves at the speed of an app update and a board decision. And in the gap between those two speeds, the gap between the harm starting and the system catching up, that is where the profit is. That is the whole business. Live in the gap. So you get a company you cannot find on a map that calls itself a notice board when the goods turn out to be poisonous, that treats the few fines small enough to reach it as petty cash, and that can restructure its entire operation faster than any government can write a rule. Put those four things together and you can finally see what Temu actually is. A company engineered on purpose to live in the gap, where the rules can't reach it. And the things it's selling into that gap faster than anyone can check it is the cheapest stuff on earth to you. So the phone cable. It's still in the drawer. I haven't used it. It's probably fine. The odds are genuinely in my favour there. I'm not actually worried about being electrocuted. I just don't know now what I'd have to not think about to plug it in. I'd have to not think about whether anyone was forced to make it. I'd have to not think about the merchant who shipped it and what they got fined that month. I'd have to not think about the plane it flew on, or the loophole that flew it, or the casino I'd have to walk through to buy it, or the city council somewhere testing the next batch for lead. That is what £2 buys. It buys you the cable, and it buys you the ability to not think about any of that. And the not thinking is the actual product. It always was. Temu told you what it was, right there in the advert, shop like a billionaire. And I think people heard that as get billionaire things for nothing. But there's another way to hear it. Billionaires don't get cheap things. Billionaires get other people to carry the cost. They externalize. The factory carries it, the workers carry it, the merchant carries it, the regulator carries it, the council lab carries it. The air we share carries it. And you get to stand at the end of that chain and feel, for £2, like the cost simply vanished. Well, it didn't vanish. It never vanishes. It just went somewhere you agreed not to look. There's a teething glove out there on sale right now that a lab found full of formaldehyde. Somewhere, tonight, a baby is chewing one. The glove cost £2. The shop cost everything else.
Okay, so we've come to the end of the video. I mean, this is crazy. But yeah, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and also consider sharing these videos to create an awareness on Temu or about Temu. I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.